Welcome to the McDonald Homecare podcast series, episode 4.
Okay, well, welcome everybody to all those who are listening. Thank you for tuning in. Look, it's my absolute pleasure to welcome Vicky Massey to our Care in the Community podcast series. Vicky is an international nutritional health coach and founder of the Victoria Albury Health Coaching. She's also a lead ambassador of the UK Health Coaches Association. So welcome, Vicky, and I'm sure the people listening are very, very keen to hear about you, about your life experiences professionally, and just the way that you've, I guess, supported and advised many different people from different walks of life, really, to live healthier and more holistic lives. So if I allow you to sort of maybe explain yourself and who you are a bit further, that'd be great.
Of course. Thank you, Leigh. So yeah, I'm Victoria. Nice to meet everyone today. I got into health coaching just a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago now. After many years of suffering with food intolerances myself, about 8 years ago, I discovered that I had a dairy intolerance. Just happened quite suddenly that I couldn't eat it anymore. It was really having a bad effect on me. And actually, when I looked into it a bit deeper, I have suffered with eczema my whole entire life, as have my grandma. And always put it down to the washing powders I was using or certain products I was using on my skin. And actually, when I eliminated the dairy, my eczema seemed to improve as well. And that was really the first insight I had into how food affects how we feel. Once I had discovered that, my husband, James, he then discovered that wheat was causing him some issues with effects such as really achy joints, brain fog, stomach issues. And again, that enhanced our interest in this sort of field. And then when my son was born 5 years ago, he was actually born with dairy and wheat intolerance. And again, we saw the impact it was having on him, and it was impacting his mood, his stomach. He was crying, he would get a rash. And actually seeing that impact on him, again, just sparked our interest further and further and further. So when I discovered what a health coach was, and I hadn't heard of one before, it's very popular in America, but we hadn't really heard of anything on the health scene in the UK. It really called to me. It was everything that I'm passionate about. It lit the fire in my belly. So I knew that I had to study it straight away. And as I was going through that process, my grandma became quite unwell. She had cancer. She was unable to now deal with the medications that she had been taking for many years. It was causing such issues with her kidneys. And really slowly we watched her decline, really sadly. And it was that feeling of helplessness without going to live with her. And she lived in Dorset and I live in Surrey. I have 2 children now. I was unable to go and live with her and cook the food for her myself. I found it really difficult to sit on the sides and watch that taking place. And I really felt for even my family to understand the impact that the food she's having is enhancing her symptoms, that I really had to be qualified in this area to talk about it. So that was what pushed me into doing it, I guess. And now to understand the power of health coaching and seeing it transform lives in front of my eyes is a real, real privilege.
Yeah, it's brilliant. I mean, it's just so good to hear sort of this has come out, this new career direction for you. As you said, that passion in your belly really has come from your own experiences, both in your own body, which obviously is vital, isn't it, to understand what's going on and what's actually improved. But you've seen it in, similar age people to yourself, like your husband, your children age, but also your grandparents, which gives you very much a holistic sort of viewpoint, I guess.
It really does. And I think the thing that really drew me to it was the aspects of the rest of your life that you don't realize are impacting how you feel. So actually, food is almost secondary to how your relationships make you feel, how your social life makes you feel, your career, your finances. All these things play such a big part in what you choose to eat and how you fuel your body, that the food is almost secondary. And that part of it really fascinates me as well, because we're changing lives through looking at a whole person approach, a whole health approach, which is really unusual in the healthcare community.
Yeah, definitely. And there's definitely a lean towards that, isn't there? In the sense of just culture of the world, really looking at the well-being of the whole person now, rather than just maybe just the food or just the social interaction. There's lots of more holistic sort of insight going on and research that comes out, which I'm sure you've sort of been I guess, advising people on as part of your health coach role, I guess.
Yeah, and we're really trying to, educate people in what health coaches do and how powerful it can be within the healthcare system. We would love to see a health coach in every GP surgery, in every community, in schools, in businesses, because we really are having an impact on everybody's health. And, we've got a sick nation out there, and we've got a health system that actually is really a sick system. It's, you go to the GP and they'll give you medication to help with the ailment that you're dealing with, but actually we're not really getting to the root causes because there just isn't the time. There is too much demand on the NHS for them to look at that. And actually that's where a health coach can really come into play, where we can really get to the root cause. Why aren't you exercising? Why aren't you able to eat well? What is causing your underlying stress and inflammation in your body? And we can get to the bottom of that by working one-to-one with clients. And I'm really passionate, obviously, about the schools. I have 2 young children, and we've got a real culture of diets and processed foods that are being marketed to us on a daily basis. And now we want to be in a place where they understand how the importance of the food and what they're putting in their bodies, but also learn how to listen to their bodies. Because I think as adults, we're learning how to do that. And if you can learn that from childhood, that would be amazing. My son often gets quite agitated and angry, and actually it's just because he's hungry. So trying to help him understand that, so as he grows up, he can understand, I've got, I'm getting a bit hungry now, maybe I should have something to eat. Whereas a lot of adults don't realise that we get hangry.
That's the new terminology I've heard that a few times, actually. Yeah, that's true. I know my wife will not appreciate me saying this, but yeah, she's definitely in that category with food. It's, trying to sort of negate what's going on for her right now. Why am I getting the look? It's like, maybe it's food. Maybe food's a big deal for her. So I completely get that. And it's really great. And it's really great because, you've touched on a few things there, which we'll get into the podcast session, because about GP and hospitalization, which I think is really important, because I guess part of this session or this podcast, we really want to highlight the importance of what good nutrition and hydration looks like, really, for the quality of life, especially for those in the elderly community. So it'll be really good to hear about your own experiences with elderly family, maybe a bit more of what you said, and just clients that maybe you've seen firsthand, especially with those who are living by themselves.
So as I mentioned, my granny was the first person sort of inspired me to do this. She lost my granddad. So there was this instant change of situation. She was very lonely. My uncle came to live with her, but he was working a lot. So he didn't have time to provide that social aspect that I think elderly people really need. And that comfort of having someone else and that connection. So that was one aspect. And she lived in Dorset. And having lived so far away, when we go to see her, she would often look very grey when we first got there, and quite ashen and, perhaps a bit depressed. And actually, once we'd been there for a few hours, you could see the colour come back in her cheeks again, and the happiness of seeing everyone in the house and sharing food together at the table. It was really, really special. So that's a memory that I really treasure. My nan lived on her own for many, many years. And again, I think loneliness was a huge aspect of her health and stress. She had to do, a lot of things for herself. That, I think, contributed to having a stroke. Quite young, really, to have quite a major stroke. And the one thing that really struck me with her is I found out once she'd had the stroke, when I did a lot of research into it, that actually I think it's 90% of people that have strokes then fall into depression. And she'd never seemed to do that. And I wonder if that's because she had learnt to manage her emotions a lot over the years of loneliness that she might have experienced before. But also she had this drive to get back to the way she was. And even though we could see that she probably wasn't going to get back to the health that she was at before, she, to the point she was running around Petersfield Heath. That was her health before, which was amazing. She actually she got herself better enough to live by herself again. She didn't want to end up in a home or, necessarily being cared for. She wanted to be able to be independent. And that was what was really big for her, to be in her house and be independent. So the carers came in and we made adjustments in her home. And I think that's what really helped get her to a stage where she was comfortable. But then there was this whole food element. So my mum would cook foods for her, do her shopping for her, and the carers would come in. But I think there was still this element of you almost can't be bothered. It's, it's such an effort to make food for yourself, especially if you've got issues with your body not moving as effectively. I think drinking was also a big thing for her, not drinking a lot of water, and it was very frustrating. But equally, it was really hard for her to go to the toilet because she'd have such an effort to get upstairs. It would take her half an hour. So now I can really understand how difficult it was for her, whereas probably then I didn't really appreciate that. And in terms of the food, although it's frustrating from the outside that, I wanted her to eat all these lovely healthy foods, well, she found it really difficult with her teeth. She needed soft food that were easy for her to digest because, again, she was sitting down quite a lot. So you don't want a load of, heavy food sat in there. So I really appreciate that now, and I sort of wish I had then. Most recently, I guess, that we've been supporting our neighbour, and we probably aren't able to support him as much as we'd like to. But we discovered last year his living conditions are really not great. My bedroom backs onto his bedroom, and actually I found out that he was, instead of sleeping in his bed, he was sleeping on the floor, which really upset me. It really affected. I just couldn't believe that that's how he's living. And he was actually hospitalised, I think it was probably 2 years ago now. And while he was there, actually some cleaners were sent in to sort out his house because we discovered that he was just, the only space he had in his house to walk was from his front door to his bedroom where he was sleeping on the floor. His bathroom wasn't working. He had no wash facilities. He had no access to running water. He has a microwave but an oven that doesn't work, and his whole place was full of stuff that he's been hoarding. So the only space he had to walk was from the bedroom, as I said, to the front door. And that's how he's been living for God knows how long. We've lived here for 10 years and we've never seen one person visit him. His curtains are drawn all the time. I've never seen him open the curtains. And just before Christmas, we said to him, we actually took around a Christmas dinner for him. And he said, thank you, because otherwise he'd be eating McDonald's over 3 days over Christmas because that was all he could get hold of. And we've noticed that we first discovered really a bit more about him because he shouts quite a lot, and we can hear him. We live in flats, so we can hear him quite a lot. And he's shouting and gets very aggravated. We hear him on phone calls and he's shouting and swearing, and it can be quite unpleasant. But actually, we've recognised now that it's when he's not eating and when he hasn't had a food delivery, or when we haven't taken him food, or it could be because he's hydrated as well. Actually thinking about it, but actually we've noticed that pattern, and we live next door. We're not even living with him. That's quite interesting.
Yeah, and you've touched on quite a few things there about people living alone, maybe isolated, whether they're older or even a little bit younger, but it really is a silent killer, and it does affect so much of that person's well-being, including nutrition, hydration, like you said, that people maybe who are living alone, that they're just emotionally, psychologically just not really engaging in the enjoyment of food, and it's something we'll touch on a little bit later. I just want to read something. It's the definition of malnutrition is defined by the National Institute for Health and Care Excellence. It says here, a state in which deficiency of nutrients such as energy, protein, vitamins and minerals causes measurable adverse effects on the body composition, function, including social and psychological and clinical outcome. I guess it'd be good, Vicky, if you give us some basic understanding of how the actual body functions, especially with older people. We talked about sort of brain and bones and muscles, those types of things, and what specific types of food and fluid would you sort of say is most beneficial for those who may be listening and really resonating with that type of scenario of your grandmother or your neighbour?
So firstly, the heart, it has to work much harder. The blood vessels and arteries are stiffening as you age. So the heart is working much harder. Your heart muscles have to change to adjust to that extra workload. So it just increases your risk of high blood pressure. In terms of your bones, they tend to shrink, which obviously makes them weaker and susceptible to fracture. And your muscles at the same time lose their strength, which obviously affects coordination and stability. Then you've got your digestive system, so your large intestine, which eliminates all our toxins. It makes structural changes. So it can be difficult passing food, which isn't helped by lack of movement, lack of fibre, lack of fluid. That all contributes to making it worse, as well as medications and iron supplements, and even medical conditions like diabetes contribute to that. Then you've got your bladder. It becomes very elastic, or becomes less elastic, so meaning you have to go to the toilet more often. And a weakening of your bladder muscles or pelvic floor, or even an inflamed prostate can make that worse. And then your brain undergoes changes that can make memory very difficult. So some good habits to get into that will support all of that would be to include daily activity, so walking, swimming maybe when we can. It's very gentle on the muscles and bones. Yoga. These all help to maintain your healthy weight, and they lower the risk of heart disease as well. They keep your digestive system moving, keep your bones and joints moving with some mobility as well. Keeping up regular hygiene is really important, like teeth brushing, regular health checkups for your ears, eyes, those sort of things will be really important to keep up with. Sleep is so important for your healing and repair, and also for your memory. So those are a few things to start with, that are the basics to start with, I would say. And obviously going to toilet regularly and not holding it in to help your large intestine work its magic as well. So in terms of drinking and eating, avoiding toxic substances, so smoking, contributes even more to the hardening of your arteries and increases your blood pressure and heart rate even more. So we're already putting loads of pressure on the heart, and that's just adding to it. So, if you're needing help to quit with those sort of things, that's something that I help clients with, looking at why people smoke in the first place. And obviously GPs can help with that as well. Alcohol affects it too. So it affects how your body's moving, how your blood's pumping around. So that's something to best avoid. Obviously, the best thing for hydration would be water. Tea, coffee to an extent, but that's also, caffeine is quite a toxic substance for your body as well and really impacts your sleep. So I try and avoid that. But if you can drink decaffeinated, then great. I would much rather see people drink more water over those sorts of drinks. But at least if you're having tea, coffee, you're having something, I guess, better than alcohol and smoking, I would say. In terms of a healthy diet, so eating calcium-rich foods would be really important for your muscles and bone health. Broccoli is really high in calcium, kale, green foods, salmon, lots of omega-3s in there, and dairy products. Although I would limit the amount of dairy products, I'd much rather see people eating the broccoli, the kale, the salmon than more dairy. Vitamin D is really important. So normally we get that from sunlight, but if you're not getting out as much and moving around, and obviously the winter, there's not as much sunlight. So taking that as a vitamin supplement, I think that's beneficial for any age. Science is showing now that actually babies should be having vitamin D all the way through adulthood and then to the elderly. Particularly in the winter, if not all year. And it really supports your immune system as well. So particularly at the moment, that would be really important to have. Now, interestingly, this might be controversial, but red wine and chocolate are known as longevity foods. So they really help with longevity of life. Actually, the oldest living person was 122 years and 164 days. And when she was it was studied about her diet, wine, red wine in particular, it has resveratrol in, which comes from grapes, and there's obviously more of it in red wine, so because it's fermented longer, and that's known as a good longevity of life vitamin. Then you've got olive oil was part of that diet as well, chocolate and honey. Chocolate, the number one longevity food known. That's an amazing fact for you. So here you are, your health coach is telling you can have red wine and chocolate, but the chocolate, we're not talking about, big bars of dairy milk and Galaxies and Cadbury's, talking about real chocolate. So dark chocolate, preferably. If you can get over 90% cacao in there, fantastic. But at least 70 would be great. A couple of squares of that a day would be really good as well for you. So just a few little things. Yeah, if you're thinking that you need a little treat, those are some couple of suggestions for you.
Yeah, it's good to end on those suggestions and those things that a lot of people do love, actually, because you go through the list that you did, and obviously the support that you provide people. And obviously a lot of people know that, that maybe their diet is not that great, and the thought of more greens on their plate rather than, other foods or the drink side of things like you talked about. So it's nice to know that actually honey and chocolate, the right chocolate and wine is still up there. It's beneficial. So I know from supporting older people in the community through the care service that we provide, that a lot of people do rely on frozen or ready-made meals, as this can be a lot easier to manage. And we sort of touched on that a little bit, didn't we, about the ease and the practical nature, or just the loneliness of wanting to prepare meals, just for yourself, really. So it'd be interesting to hear your thoughts and recommendations about ready-made meals versus freshly cooked meals in regards to sort of health and well-being, especially for the elderly.
Well, obviously, if you're living on your own or, not cooking for anybody else, then there's that aspect of waste, isn't there? That you don't want to buy big bags of kale or big bags of greens or 2 salmon fillets because you've got no one to share it with. So that's an aspect of why I guess ready meals are there, and why people choose to have them, because they're quick and easy and there's portioned up for you. And obviously you could just heat it very quickly. unfortunately, the way food is made these days is very different to the way it was, many years ago. And this is the difficulty that I tried to share with my grandma, that she didn't, I guess, understand. The food is produced in such a different way. Now it's full of lots of preservatives. The way our fruits and vegetables are grown are full of preservatives and pesticides, which is so different to how it used to be grown. Apples, I think they have something like 60 odd different pesticides sprayed onto apples when they're grown. So this is something to bear in mind, when you're eating this stuff. This is toxic substances that are getting inside your body, that will be having an impact somewhere if we don't eliminate them. So the way food is grown and prepared, this is something that I'm really passionate about. I'm also an ambassador for the Real Food campaign. We're really passionate about helping communities understand where their food is coming from soil to plate. So even from animal rearing, we know about battery caged chickens, and we want to be eating grass-fed meat if we can. We want to be eating line-caught fish, not farmed fish if we can help it. That's, those sort of things are really important. And in these ready meals, we've got lots of preservatives in there to enable us to eat it whenever we're ready. Lots of salt content. If you look at the ingredients on there, there might be quite a few ingredients that you wouldn't even recognise. And really, they're all toxic substances that we're putting in our body. If you look at an apple, there's one ingredient. If you look at a home-cooked meal that everything that's gone into it, that is so different to eating a meal that somebody else has made and put in a packet for you. Not only that, you've got toxics coming from the plastic that it might be in as well, that then you're heating in the microwave perhaps. So that's a whole nother element, and I won't go down that road because it's too far to go down today. But that's another element to consider as well. Something that we talk about, and it might sound a little bit woo-woo, but food that's home cooked just tastes so different from food that is ready-made, in my opinion. How much nicer is it to go to a restaurant where it's a family-run restaurant? The food tastes so much better than in a chain restaurant where it's all mass-produced, it's reheated. You want to go to the restaurant where the grandmas passed down the recipes through the generations, and you're eating that food that they did. That's just so different. So we talk about this extra vitamin L, the vitamin love. When that goes into food, it feels very different. Eating food that someone else has cooked for you, or cooking food for someone else, is just such a joy. It brings a whole nother level of joy to it, which you don't get from just picking food off a supermarket shelf. We have a saying that know the hands that feed you, that will help your food taste better. It's a nice way to think about it, I think. And I find if you're cooking the food as well, or someone else has cooked it for you, you're taking more time over eating it, so you'll digest it much better. We all eat very quickly, I would say. I don't really know anyone that eats slowly apart from my son. It drives me crazy, but actually we want to be eating slower. We need to digest our food properly, moving it around our mouths, that saliva, breaking it down enough so that it can go through our digestive tract and get into our intestines and break down enough. We want to get all those nutrients and minerals out of it when we're eating this good food, so we don't want to be rushing it through and our body not be able to get the goodness out of it. So there's companies now that are really leading the way in helping this argument of convenience versus healthy food. And there's things like Gausto and Mindful Chef, and there's a few companies like that where you actually choose the recipes and they send you the ingredients. So then you still cook them if you can. There's no waste because you've got exactly what you need to make those recipes. And then you enjoy this lovely food that you've cooked, and it looks great as well. It's always really colourful. There's always vegetables. Someone else has worked out the nutritional values of it for you, which is great. And then you've got companies like Cook, who I know you work with, Leigh, and I know we'll talk about them in a moment. But they have this fantastic selection of home cooked food, and you can feel that love that's gone into that and how different it tastes. We've actually, a few friends and I have just sent a big box of cooked food to a friend of ours who's a paramedic, and really struggling to cook herself and her family food at the moment because she's so busy and stressed at her work. So just to have that coming home from these 16-hour shifts that she's doing that are mentally draining, and being able to have a home cooked meal to just pull out the freezer is changing her life. It sounds dramatic, but it really is.
No, definitely. And I think you sort of touched on there that, not all pre-made meals are not, they're not all bad. You talked about, obviously, there are lots of more preservatives and salts in the packaging and things that make them last and all those sorts of things. But there actually are really good companies out there that are promoting meals that are cooked with that vitamin of love, as you said, and just are nutritious, but they're also practically easy to prepare for older people. I mean, again, and it just highlights that it's not just what's going into the food, I guess. It's actually that person is eating by themselves is one of the biggest things that I guess, it really does enhance the whole eating and drinking experience, doesn't it, from a physical and emotional level? I guess some of the listeners may have elderly loved ones who are living by themselves, who I guess have tried everything to encourage their loved ones to eat better or drink more water or less of this and more of that. And it just can be just so frustrating, really, especially if they don't want to listen. So I guess on a practical level, how would you feel that you could encourage those family members to support their loved ones who may be living by themselves, who are taking the easy route, who are, are not getting the right nutrients or proteins or minerals or vitamins? It'd be really nice to hear your thoughts about any practical examples you could do, you could advise to those types of people.
So first of all, I'd be thinking, does the food look good and does it smell good? Because if it does, we almost eat with our eyes first, don't we? We see that food, we smell it cooking, and we eat that way before we even taste it. So if it looks and smells good and they start that tasting process before it even begins, I think that's really important. So perhaps cooking the food there with them so they can watch you would be a really nice thing to do if you can. Is it easy for them to eat? That'd be something I'd be thinking about. So, it might not be that they're being lazy. It's just that they can't practically eat it. It's really hard for them to cut up, or it's really hard for them to chew with their teeth. So is it actually soft enough for them to be able to eat? Consider soups. There's loads of beautiful recipes for soups. You can put so much goodness in there that they probably won't even realize is in it. And they just taste so nice, and they're so easy to eat and so easy to heat up and so easy to store. That would be something that I would recommend. Even juices. I did try and get my gran to drink a green juice once, and she didn't have it again. But if you can do juices or smoothies, again, like I do with the kids, really, I just put as much goodness in as I possibly can that they won't even know about. A flaxseed is one of my little things in a jar in my pantry. That's just such an easy thing to add in. It's full of fibre. It's really good for you, good for your digestive system. And you can just add a spoonful of it in and no one knows about it. It's great. Avoiding caffeine if you can. So encourage them to drink more water. That's not always easy, but why don't make it look nice? You could put a jug out with things like cucumber and mint in, or apple, or oranges slices, or lemon slices, just to make it look nicer and make it look more appealing would be a little way to encourage them. And even having like a jug or a bottle that they could pour out of into a glass, so that you sort of measuring how much they're drinking during the day and they can see that it's going down, that would be a good way to do it as well. I guess, some people don't want to have to keep going to the kitchen. It's quite a lot of effort to go and get the water, so have it ready for them. That would be great. Things like porridge, so easy to get a lot of goodness in. And look for companies that are making food easier for you. So companies like Cook, but I know a company called the Great British Porridge Company, and I actually bought a few packets of their porridge for my neighbour. It's porridge full of goodness in lots of different flavours, and you just mix it with water. So easy. He can have that at any time of day. He doesn't need to store it anywhere. It's in a packet, so it will last for ages. It's all dried, but it's got all the goodness that he needs. It's dairy, wheat-free, really good for you, and just easy for them to eat. It's soft and it's full of goodness. I think it's great. And are there any other easier ways to get things in their diet? A fruit and veg box, perhaps. We have a lovely fruit and veg box that comes, a seasonal fruit and veg box that comes from Milk and More. They deliver our milk and they deliver our veg box. And just seeing that fruit arrive and how lovely it looks. This week was full of kale and full of greens. It looks beautiful and it makes you want to eat it because it looks really nice. You could pre-cook meals for them. So like mince is a really soft meat to have. You could fill bolognese or chili with loads of goodness without them, again, realising. And it's something, if you're cooking something for you, why not leave extra portions so that you can give that to your elderly relative when you next see them, so they can have a stock in their freezer of this lovely home-cooked food and think about when you cooked it. Or better still, share a meal with them. I mean, that would be the ideal if you can. A little tip for you when you're making your roast dinner on Sunday: if you do eat roast chicken, get those bones when you finish, don't chuck them away, put them in a saucepan, fill them with water, chuck in a bay leaf and some onions maybe and some other veggies, and make a chicken broth. All you do is leave it on the stove for a good, I would say 6 to 9 hours would be optimum, because you really want to pull that collagen out of the bones of the chicken, and use that as chicken stock to add into their soups. That will be so good for their bone health, for their skin, for their digestive system. Chicken broth is full of probiotics, so it will be great for their gut as well to keep them healthier. And that's a really easy thing to do. It doesn't take much effort. And you can just use that chicken broth without them even realising. Or if they want to, they could drink the chicken broth, but I haven't done that yet. Sharing a meal with someone, as I said, would be the ideal if you can. And we do have this sort of saying, we say cook once, eat twice. So if they're having some boiled eggs in the morning, suggest they cook 3 and then they've got one for the next 3 mornings and just keep them in the fridge. If they're making a salad, make it big enough so they've got enough for a couple of days. If they're making soup, make enough for 4 portions. They don't need to be cooking every single day, and I certainly don't want to be cooking every single day. So I really try and overcook when I am, so that I've got the goodness to pull on when I need it, the good food. And then if you're saving the portions left over from when you're cooking, that feels almost like a ready meal, doesn't it? You've put it in the freezer, you can pull it out, quickly cook it, but you know you're getting some goodness and some home cooked food. I've tried the sharing research. I've tried getting my gran to listen to certain things. I've tried not buying certain foods. I've tried going about it from telling the rest of the family that she shouldn't eat this and shouldn't eat that. I've shown her books. That didn't really work, to be honest. So the best thing I could do was provide her company, and talk to them about the other things that may be impacting how they're feeling and why they're not looking after themselves if they're not. The loneliness aspect, do they want connection? Can you ring them? Can you make a bit more of an effort to ring them? And something the UK health coaches are really passionate about is having a purpose and meaning in life. And I think that gets perhaps a little bit lost at that age. I think you perhaps, your purpose in life is to have a family or your job, and then you retire, and then your family have their own family, and then perhaps they move or their lives get quite busy. And then I think you maybe think, what is my purpose and meaning of my life now? So I think that aspect really plays in. And I think thinking about that, when we're talking about a whole health approach, that's definitely an integral part of bringing someone to better health and helping them feel happier. Are they feeling left out of society? We are moving towards a cashless society. We are all online now. Even our banking, is all online. Food deliveries is all online, especially it's got even more enhanced with COVID. That is going to be an aspect that plays on them. So I think consider that as well, not just about the food. We always look at the food is almost sort of secondary to what I look at with clients. I always start with the more of the circle of life stuff first. How are they sleeping? How's their home environment? How are their relationships? How's their joy? Have they got any joy? Are they moving their bodies? Before we actually look at the nutrients and the intricacies of what food they're putting inside them.
Wow, there's some really good stuff there. I mean, I'm just trying to make some notes myself, really, because it is so important. And you've given some really good practical tips on both, I think, for families who, I think, just picking up on some of those little subtleties of how they can actually encourage or get good stuff into, their family's, I guess, diet, but, and just being there, being present, the smells, the stimulus of all of that, just sharing a meal. I think those things, as well as the other side where, that can't be done, and geographically it's really limited. So for those people, knowing that actually there are good food producers of ready-made meals, and like you said, the porridges as well, that actually they're, those companies are out there, and it's more highlighted. They're looking at doing it better, aren't they? Raising the bar and making sure that people who are wanting ready-made meals for practical purposes, actually there is really good stuff out there. And I know myself for the many years of living care that it's so, it never ceases to amaze me when somebody has been living by themselves or a couple living by themselves and just not eating well, just poor diet, just generally just lost motivation and interest, really. But when actually someone comes into the home, someone that brings back the home cooking, the stimulation of that, the smells, the doing things together, the interaction, and also then obviously the sitting down and sharing the meal, it just changes things. It really does change things dramatically, really. Completely understand, though, that, that's not achievable in everyone's circumstances. But I think it's a point that you've brought out, and something that I've seen over and over again, that the sharing of meals is very much a key aspect to actually someone's health and well-being, especially with food and hydration as well. Unfortunately, there is a real impact, though, isn't there, of poor nutrition and hydration on somebody's body and mind, infections, poor mobility, fatigue, sleeping, all those things, and things that you've mentioned as well. And really are some horrifying statistics about the impact of poor nutrition and hydration in older people, especially when they are needing to be hospitalized. So I'm not too sure if you have, any information or anything you can share about that. I've got some statistics here, but I'll sort of open up to you first, Vicky.
Oh, I'd love to hear your statistics.
Okay, great. Well, my ones anyway. So basically, good nutrition reduces the likelihood of hospital admission from urinary tract infections, which are really common in the elderly due to the lack of fluids that we've talked about. And there's a proven link between the nutrition and higher risk of those falls. And when you talk about UTI, urinary tract infections, both mentally or psychologically and physically, they can have a massive effect. I'm not too sure if you had this or I have an understanding through your grandmother or anything, but just the confusion, the lack of awareness of what's going on, hallucinations from these infections, and then to the fatigue and the falls and the hospitalization that can come from that. It's a massive spiral, real rabbit hole when it comes down to just those fluids not coming into the body or being passed through the body properly, really. And the falls, based on that, are the most common cause of accidental injury in over 65. And they cost the NHS around about £2 billion per year just from sort of being able to deal with people falling, whether at home or in care homes. And then so when admitted to hospital, that when they are being admitted because of dehydration, there's been links to that there's a massive higher risk to actually mortality, that they're not actually leaving hospital because of that dehydration. Just finishing off, that elderly people with poor nutrition take far longer to be discharged from hospital. That you may say, well, that's by the by, but actually 10 days in hospital, a hospital bed leads to 10 years worth of lost muscle mass in people over 80.
That's shocking.
And that's massive, isn't it? 10 years. It is, yeah. So every day to every year. And so, yes, people may get discharged. They may have fluid intake when they're there on IV drips or wherever it may be. Yes, they may have that 24-hour care or people observing. But actually, the damage that's being done during that time for when they do come out, actually what their life looks like when they come out is completely different from what it was when they first went in. And we see this all the time in setting up care services for people. And it takes a lot for them to try and recover that frailty, that mobility again. But it really can be really stopped or minimized a lot of the time if the fluids and the nutrition, the hydration was sorted a long time before that happens.
And do you know what, Leigh? There's so many things that you said there that just, highlighted to me. We have access to clean water, we don't have to walk miles. We can just switch on the tap and we've got clean water. So there must be a reason why they're not drinking it. And so you need to discover for your families why they can't. Is it that they don't respect themselves enough? Is it that they are finding it too difficult to get out to the kitchen? Is it that they find it really boring and they just don't like the taste? What is it? What's the core root cause of why they're not drinking that? Because if you can save them having 10 years of muscle mass reduction and a hospitalization, which might end in mortality from them just drinking water, I mean, it's heartbreaking to think that people are dying just because of that when we have access to this water so easily, and lots of people don't. It's such an easy thing to do, but it equally isn't an easy thing because there is something that's stopping them from doing it. So as health coaches, that's exactly what we do. Get to the bottom of the reason why they're not. And that's what I'd encourage you to do, rather than keep saying, you need to drink the water, you need to drink the water. Because everyone knows they need to drink water. Everyone knows they need to eat more fruit and vegetables, but they're not. And that's the reason. That's what you've got to find out why. And we've got to change that. And you only change habits through having a positive experience with them. So if you're drinking water that looks really nice and you feel really good because you've seen this jug next to you and you've poured it out, this lovely cucumber water, and it tastes really nice and you've drunk the whole jug today and it's made you feel really good, that's only going to make you want to keep doing it. Whereas if your family member just keeps bashing you for not drinking enough water, you're not drinking enough water, you're not drinking enough water, that's not going to make you want to change the habit. So I think that's something really important. I think also to pick up on that our healthcare system is actually a sick care system. It's not a healthcare system. They're getting you better while you're in there, but then you're going home and you're falling back in the same habits you were before. There's nothing when you come back of support to prevent that happening again. And actually at the moment, we want to be doing all we can to minimise anyone going to hospital, because the chances are not looking good if you're having to go into hospital right now. And if you're going in, again, it sounds so easy. If you're going in just because you're dehydrated, you can prevent the mortality that's taking place day after day after day, after minute after minute after minute at the moment. It's so important. And I think it's easy for us to say, and even as an adult that has full mobility and access to water, I still find it difficult to some days drink enough. But when you realise what you can do to prevent ill health just through drinking water, then you need to think about it like that. What can we do to prevent this ill health? We don't want to be treating the sick, we want to be preventing it. And unfortunately, you go into hospital and then you get given a medication, or go to a GP, you get given a medication to fix that ailment, and then you get more symptoms of something else, and then you give more medication to fix that ailment, and then it goes on and on and on until your kidneys can't work anymore because they've been overloaded with medications. They can't eliminate any more toxins because there's too many going in, and that's when our bodies start failing us. Sorry to be very morbid.
No. Look, it is. Unfortunately, this is the reality, and it is a vicious cycle. You're right, Vicky. There really is a vicious cycle that we all get into our lives. But as you've rightfully said earlier in the podcast, as people get older, into the over 65s or even later into the 80s, their body does change, and so they really do need to do their best to change with it, or to have the support of family who, maybe listen to this and picking up on things to help them, do the basics of water and good food and nutrition, those types of things, because otherwise it really is a vicious cycle that we can get away with maybe in younger years, but it's going to catch up, isn't it, really? I think it'd be really good to finish on just some practical and good things. So if I just start and just say, like with nutrition, you talked about good nutrition and regular physical activity play a productive role in the number of age-related conditions, and the more enjoyment people have with food, the healthier they will live. And so just some practical things for people listening. Signs and symptoms of malnutrition that you may be looking at, not just for yourself, obviously, but maybe for older relatives. Lack of interest in eating and drinking, feeling tired all the time, feeling weak, becoming ill more often, and taking longer to recover. So there's some signs and symptoms to look out for. So what top tips with nutrition, could you give to people, just to really quickly finish off?
I mean, this is really for everybody, not just the elderly, but whole foods. So non-processed foods, foods that have, we say, 5 or less ingredients, really are whole foods that you know exactly what's gone in them. They fill you up and they fuel your body. They regulate your cholesterol and they ward off cancer and dementia. We need to be getting as many whole foods in our body as possible, and as many green foods as possible, because they just contain everything that our body needs. High fibre helps keep your digestive system in shape. It's essential for optimum health. Some additional fibre, I'm really focusing on fibre intake at the moment, actually. And things like Rivitas, oats, flaxseed, those things have really high fibre in. Vegetables, the same, green vegetables again. Really, 30 grams a day is what is suggested for an adult of fibre. So keep an eye on that. Maintain consistent eating times to stable your blood sugars. So, if you don't feel like eating straight away in the morning, eat, a couple of hours after you've woken up, but eat regularly at the same times each day, and probably not 3 to 4 hours before you go to bed. So eat earlier, 3 to 4 hours before, just to give your body time during the day to stable its blood sugars once you've eaten, and then during the night to give your body time to detoxify. If you can't get access to fresh food very easily, frozen food is not terrible. Frozen vegetables actually are frozen from fresh. So if you can't get, for example, berries aren't in season at the moment, fresh berries in your freezer would be really handy to have. I always have broccoli, cauliflower, berries, perhaps like mango and things in my freezer, just ready to go into smoothies or to steam for veg in the evenings. Peas are always in there, sweet corn. If that's the way you're going to get the veg into your body, then do it that way. And there's no wastage that way as well, because you just take out the portions that you need. I really love fruit and vegetable boxes. I think it's really easy to get fresh local ones delivered to your door, seasonal if you can, or organic. I love the look of them when they arrive. I think they look brilliant and it makes me want to eat it. Find your joy in life. The way you do one thing is the way you do everything. So find some joy. If you're waking up feeling really sad and miserable, let's find you some joy in your life to help you feel, to help you respect yourself enough to nourish your body with this really good food and through water. There's really no such thing as a healthy diet with high levels of animal produce, unfortunately. So more plant-based foods. Not saying that anyone should be necessarily vegan or, anything like that. But the more plant-based foods you can put in your diet, the better. And just the last thing is green vegetables really are a miracle food against cancer. So I definitely recommend including them in your diet every single day.
Brilliant. And some practical things, especially with the elderly, just maybe eating smaller portions more often. We talked about sharing meals with someone, chopping up those green vegetables or the vegetables, that you can do, and fruit as snacks. And I know you mentioned that before. And I guess maybe less salty and sugary sort of meals and more starchy carbohydrates and fish. Yeah. And hydration, just to finish off here. So basically, old adults do not have to just drink plain water, although we know that's so important to get hydrated. But, coffees, the decaffeinated coffees, teas, the fruit juices you mentioned, some other sweetened beverages, fruits and vegetables, they all contain water for healthy living, I guess. So just for me, just to put out there, signs and symptoms of dehydration, really important as we talked about the effects of this. So feeling thirsty, dark yellow and maybe strong smell in urine, feeling dizzy or lightheaded, feeling tired all the time, dry mouth, lips and eyes. So really important, not just for your own well-being, for those who are looking after maybe loved ones as well, that when they are there, are these things present? Because if they are, then there's something going on with the hydration for that loved one. So top tips really quickly, Vicky, for hydration, you would say?
Oh, for hydration. So yeah, foods, fruits and vegetables. Loads of fruits have lots of water in. Things like cucumber, celery, really high water content in those sorts of foods. Just enjoy what you're drinking. Make it look nice. Have it in your favourite mug. Take your time over it and just enjoy it. And if it's a glass of wine, just do it in moderation.
With the dark chocolate.
Yeah.
Brilliant. And like you talked about earlier, small drinks on a regular basis. I know for older people especially, that big mug or that big, litre bottle that a lot of people would have on their desk is not going to be the way that typically an older person is going to want to feel motivated for that. So, smaller, more regular smoothies and milkshakes you mentioned are really good. Homemade ice lollies and jelly, I guess, as well. That's pretty good in spring and summer to get water content in. And also, I think I realizing with what we do in support of people is it's just experimenting, isn't it, really, with different drink temperatures that can really help people. A warmer drink is what the person wants. So they obviously revert to teas and coffees, but actually maybe just a warm water or a herbal tea or just something, a hot chocolate, just different things that can happen, really. So, and ideas. So look, Vicky, thank you so much for your time. Honestly, it's just been so good to hear about your own personal and professional experiences in this area. And I just think whoever's listening to this will definitely pick up on stuff that's going to really support them in their own life and well-being, but also for elderly loved ones as well. So really appreciate it. Thanks for your time. Talk to you again.
Thanks for having me on, Leigh.